Hello and welcome to The Stinger, a superfan's guide to Marvel, Star Wars, and much, much more. I'm your co-host Josh Gann, and joining me today on the episode, they've got their popcorn buckets in hand and spice flowing through their veins. It's Trent, Neely, and Joseph Snead. How we doing, guys?
Ready to ride some sandworms. That's how we're doing.
That's
What's
right.
up.
That's right.
Listen, Al Gaib. Shout
Oh
out
my
Javier
gosh.
Bardem.
Oh my gosh. We like the excitement can't be contained right now. We got on our Zoom call about 15 minutes ago and kind of just all stared at each other like what do we talk about other than what we're supposed to be podcasting about? There's nothing else we can think about. Thank you all for being here as always today. Special episode. It is Dune time. It is Dune Part 2 review day on The Stinger. So thank you for joining us. If you haven't watched Dune Part 2 yet, please go to a theater near you and watch this movie. It is a big deal if you haven't noticed. You can subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast. You can subscribe to us on YouTube, and you can follow us on social media at The Stinger Pod on Instagram and on TikTok. Guys, it's here. The moment has arrived. Arguably, the movie event of the entire year is upon us, and the three of us got out to the theater on opening weekend to see Dune Part 2. I'm so excited to talk about this. And I'm just gonna open up the conversation now. Guys, how are we feeling? What was your general reaction to Dune Part 2?
I mean, amazing. I think regardless of what you think of this movie narratively and like character-wise, like as a technical piece of visual sound filmmaking, like this is like one of the coolest things that's ever been done. I'm just gonna shout out a couple names from some crew members real quick. So obviously Denis Villeneuve directing, co-writing this thing. John Spates, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your last name, co-writing. Hans Zimmer, once again, the GOAT, coming back for the score. Greg Fraser, between this, Dune Part 1, and The Batman, I am all in for everything this guy does the cinematography for now. Production design by Patrice Vermette, costumes by Jacqueline West, and then the entire sound team just killing the game. Just from an audio visual standpoint, I got to see this not in IMAX, but at least in a Dolby Atmos theater. And the sound design during the sandworm sequence was moving around the whole theater. And it was like one of the most just amazing 3 minutes I've ever had. And also the rest of the movie is just pretty generally stunning to look at and amazing.
Joseph.
Well, Trent took the technical stuff. I really enjoyed the narrative stuff and the character decisions, and we'll get to it later. Lots of changes from the books. Most of them I was cool with. Really only a couple things I was kind of like, I wish this had been different. But for the most part, narratively, I think it was good. And it was one of those movies, sometimes you watch it because it is a really long movie.
It's very long.
Yes, it is.
Sometimes you look at it and you're like, man, this movie's really long. When's it going to be over? And I was like, man, this movie's really long. Can it keep going? But yeah, I enjoyed the movie, and I'm still mad at you for stealing it on the draft board.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Don't forget. I'm the owner of Dune Part 2 in our 2024 hype draft. I mean, like, I don't know. Like, I saw it last night, and it has been living rent-free in my head for the past 24 hours. I got to talk to my brother about it earlier today. We had a nice long conversation about the differences between the book now that I finished the book and the movie. I just think like this is how I described it to a friend was like, a lot of people use the word breathtaking to describe movies nowadays. And it only feels right describing this movie as breathtaking. Like this was there were moments in the theater where I thought I have never seen anything like this before on a movie screen. It was movie magic. It was, and it's so cool that we got it with this story in particular, with something that is in that fandom realm, with something that is this like a kind of larger than life mythology, the stuff that we love to talk about. and we got one of the most technically impressive movies that I think maybe has ever been made. And I know that's a big statement, but that's how I'm feeling about this movie. I can't wait to get into the nitty gritty of it. What was the theater like for you guys?
Everybody seemed to be vibing.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was funny though, because like the last opening weekend thing I saw, or opening like close to opening weekend, was No Way Home, and obviously with
Oh
that, it
my
was like
gosh.
a lot of the clapping, cheering stuff for that. This one though, it was like everybody was just as locked in, but there wasn't a lot of shouting. Like people felt afraid that they were gonna miss stuff or not pay attention, I think, and people
Yeah.
just wanted to like absorb this, which was kind of awesome. The people were just truly like locked in for a ride at my screening. Nobody was really talking or like being a distraction, or nobody's phone seemed to be going off. It was pretty amazing to see people just locked in.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Mine was the same way. I'll go next because mine's the same as you. Like the people sitting next to us in our row, like I could tell, like they were leaned forward in their seat the whole movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Silent, but like
Yeah.
genuinely like on the edge of their seat. And it wasn't like this was one of those movies where there's like a big shock coming down the road that you had to be on the edge of your seat for. But I just feel like it was that engaging. It was that engaging of a movie. So I loved it because, yeah, even though I've been to some opening weekend movies in the past year since No Way Home, still a lot of them are built to get the big theater reactions nowadays. And this
Right.
movie's not built for that.
Right.
So it was cool. It was really cool. Joseph, you were coming off the heels of a youth retreat on low on energy. So how'd you make it through?
Well, I got not a Dr. Pepper, a Mr. Pibb at the movie theater.
They didn't have Dr. Pepper, man? Come on.
No, they didn't. It was tragic. It's a Coke theater, but whatever. Coke is better than Pepsi, so I'll die on that hill. It was interesting. I was seventh wheeling at this movie.
Wow.
So it was, I guess I'm friends with two of the guys, and then there was another guy and all three of their wives. And I think some of the wives were dragged along, although one of them enjoyed the movie.
Nice.
And she's read the books. But one of my friend's wives was also at the youth retreat this weekend, and I knew we were going to the movie, so I saw her Saturday and said, "Are you excited to go see the movie?" And she pretty much went, "He gave me a quiz to see if I remembered what happened in the first movie. I didn't pass, so I had to watch the movie." But the theater was not actually that full. We went at 7:30
Okay.
on a Sunday evening, which is not really movie going time where I'm from.
Yeah.
I actually really enjoyed it. As a person who does not like big crowds and groups of people,
Yep.
I enjoyed kind of the sitting with some friends type of thing. Had a guy behind me snoring. I was wondering at first what that noise was in the movie because I said, "Oh, I've heard the sandworm noise before," and it's like some type of growl. Then figured it out.
He was trying to channel the voice,
Pretty much. But for the most part, the experience of the movie was really, really fun, and it was just a beautiful looking movie. Very orange at the beginning. We made the joke, me and Buddy and his wife, before we went in, and she said it's very orange. I said, "Yeah, it's like every movie that's set in Mexico."
Has that orange or yellow tint if it's
That
like
tint,
Mexico, Colombia, or
like
India.
Egypt.
Yeah.
But in that, the opening of the movie has an eclipse. It was very orange at the beginning of the movie.
Extremely.
Extremely
kinda
orange.
Like Cheetos orange.
Yeah, then it kind of chilled out. For the rest of the movie, it was just like brown and tan. But yeah,
They do. I feel like the color palette's really good in this movie.
Yes.
It never feels fake.
Well, and then it's kind of strange talking about a really cool color palette when one of the coolest places in the movie is black and white.
Yeah.
Yes.
That scene's so
We're gonna talk
awesome.
about it.
So-
That was pretty epic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like we're talking about all the like experiences we had in the theater.
Mhm.
I think it's pretty obvious so far. We love this movie.
Yeah.
Should be.
Not
Context clues.
not everybody that we saw this movie with love this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Trent, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Do we want to go into all of them now? Because there's a lot.
Maybe maybe not. Maybe we'll say maybe we get through our thoughts first and
yeah. Because I don't want
to. But
as it comes up.
Your sister didn't enjoy. She wasn't rocking with this as much.
So okay. Well, let me not deface my sister and brother-in-law here. But they were just like basically on the macro. They were like they thought this one was paced horribly compared to the first one, and they were like seemingly so much happened in this one and so little at the same time.
Interesting.
That was their macro complaints, and then They had issues with some of the character motivations, mainly Jessica and Paul.
Okay, I would love
so that's some of the bullet points of all of it.
That's good to know because I would love to talk about that stuff because I don't know. I actually don't know for sure where I sit with all of that myself.
Yeah. And opinions are allowed to change, obviously.
Right.
Things can ebb and flow over days, weeks, whatever. So
it's just that I think it's just because the reaction has been so overwhelmingly positive online,
even by like critics,
right,
who
exactly.
hate everything now,
right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, critics are like, yeah. The early 2020s has been quite the time for cynicism. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
Cinemacism.
There we go.
That's a
trademark
good
it.
Josephism right there. I went with my wife Haley, and Haley had quite the time watching Dune Part 2.
Did she watch the first one?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Okay, I just making sure we get context.
And really, really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I underestimated how different of a vibe Part 2 would be to Part 1.
Yeah, I think this is part of Emily and Matt's experience as well.
Especially since I read Part 2 literally the week before. I read that portion of the book the week before we went and saw it. So like I legit closed the book, finished the book minutes before we left to go to the theater. So it's just there was a lot of brutality and disturbing sequences and just like a gruesome level to the things happening on screen. And that's not Haley's vibe at all. And like that,
sure.
And absolutely that's okay. And then once the movie started rolling, I realized like, oh nah, this is not gonna end well. I could feel it. But she stuck it out. She was a trooper. She was pissed at our boy Paul at the end of this movie.
Emily was enraged. Like she was like, what is it like specifically the way I think we're talking about the same thing. The way a thing is sequenced where Paul says one thing and does something afterwards.
Something different.
She was
after.
like, what is this guy talking about?
Yep.
Like Emily was right back in her like Love is Blind energy of the pods. Like what is happening?
By the way, I have been sucked into Love is Blind over the past 2 weeks.
I have not watched any other season, but this season has me fully locked in.
It's crazy. Okay. What are the names? Chelsea and Jimmy?
Chelsea and Jimmy.
Train wreck City.
But they are the Oscar winners for this year already. Like they have entertained me more than almost anything so far this year. Like
honestly, same.
So shout out to you, Chelsea and Jimmy.
Never watched Love is Blind, but last week I did watch the first 2 episodes of Ted Lasso.
That's right, Joseph. Hey, what'd you think real quick? Quick Ted Lasso.
Great show.
Right?
Great show. As a fan of both forms of football, fantastic show.
Yeah.
And as someone who understands the soccer humor, hilarious.
Yes. I feel like it definitely has good soccer humor in there. You got to let us know if you keep watching it. Because season 1 is truly, I think, one of the best seasons of TV ever.
I do as well.
Yeah. It's so good. All right. So let's talk about the maybe we'll start with the pacing and like Paul's journey in this movie.
Yes.
Because it's definitely to me, I felt like it's a little different than the book handles it. I don't know if you agree, Joseph. But it takes it like there is a clear difference in where he is at the end of this movie than he is at the beginning of this movie. So how'd y'all feel about Paul's journey in this?
Okay, so I liked the whole movie. I would even say loved the whole movie. But I will say for me, the sequence that I was like most emotionally resonating with was the section of him like becoming ingratiated to the Fremen culture and being like, hey, how do I actually figure out the sandwalk thing properly with
Mm-hmm.
Zendaya?
Mm-hmm.
And like she's explaining the awesome windsurfing thing and like getting his name and all that. And that's one of Emily's things too, is she was so confused by how much time was supposed to have passed with them in the desert.
Interesting.
And because she didn't know, it felt unearned when it switches to the like the revolution part in the back third. So that part was great, but I almost wonder, and this leads into a macro thing for me. I almost wonder if this would have been better as a trilogy.
Oh,
Like,
the
what if
whole
we
first
end?
book?
Yeah, like what if we end this movie when the sandworm ride happens, and then the third movie is about the transition to Lisan Al Galib and the revolution? Because I feel like that part is sped up a lot faster, which we can talk about more in a little bit.
Joseph, what do you think of that?
I liked the structure of the movie. I I don't. This goes back to like The Hobbit of splitting one
Yeah.
movie or one book into three movies. I don't go for it. Generally, I don't really go for these 2-part book adaptations. Uh, I think it's earned with this and like with Harry Potter. Um, even though I have problems with the last Harry Potter movie, but that's for another day. But I think I think some of the stuff with the timing of the movie could have been, and this gets into one of my little minor things. I think the timing could have been passed better with a more realized version of Alia,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
like from the book. Again, I get it because a little freaky baby walking around is just really weird.
Oh, they still found a way to make that baby freaky, though.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, but part of the freakiness of Alia in the book is people interacting directly with her instead
Yeah,
of
that's true.
her mommy being like, Alia is saying you're an idiot. But yeah, I think that was part of the pacing. I think Josh, this gets into baby Leto, like
Yeah, yeah.
not even being around.
Big missing character from the movie.
That could have helped with the timing. I think that could have helped with Paul's like heel turn of what happens to Leto
Interesting.
in the book, of him being like, okay, now it's
Mm-hmm.
time. I'm about to kill everybody.
Do you know
I
what we're
think,
talking about, Trent?
So I know, I guess, spoilers for movie and book,
Yes.
or
Yes.
well, book, but like, so I read briefly that like he and Chani have a kid
Yep.
in the desert, and I
Yep.
was like, oh, that's very different.
Yep.
And
Very different.
that would hugely change the emotional impact of
yeah,
a lot of stuff.
they have a kid that Paul names Leto
Okay.
after his
Yeah.
dad,
Mhm.
and then Leto gets killed while Paul is doing a raid, right, Josh?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's because it's right. Like he finds out about it when they get to Arrakeen, into the throne room where the Emperor is at.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
So I think timing wise, they could have had it where where Fade comes in and just like annihilates Siege Tabor.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think they could have done minor tweaks to the story and had that be where Baby Leto gets killed.
Yes.
They leave and Paul is like, it's go time.
Yes.
I think that could have explained his villainous
His
turn
turn.
easier
Yeah.
than he drinks evil sandworm water,
Right, because
which is an oversimplification of what happens.
Yes.
right,
And
'cause
also,
refresh my memory a little bit, because you guys saw this more recently. In the movie, it's just that like he's like, no, I don't want to go there, because if I go there, like I'm gonna drink the thing and the holy war's gonna happen. I don't want that. But then like Austin Butler's like, let's just shoot cannons at everything. And when he realizes they have that OP move, he's just like, okay, now I have to go south. Right, basically in the
I
movie
think
version.
situationally he's feeling forced to go south because of that, because everyone else is going, and kind of the thing with Paul throughout the series is that he has like the illusion of a choice,
Right.
and then he
Yeah.
finally figures out like, well, guess what? I don't.
Yep.
And when he takes the water of life, I'll just say the Holy War is the best future.
Oh,
So if that lets you know
Interesting.
about kind of the burden that Paul takes on, he still does really, really horrible stuff.
yeah, and I think that I almost wonder if that to people who don't are maybe confused by or wasn't buying Paul's journey in this movie, like maybe like there is a part of it that could seem super unexpected, this turn. Like he's very clearly on the hero's journey
Mm-hmm.
at the end of part 1
Yeah.
and at the beginning of this movie.
Yes.
And so him having a not villain turn, but just like a corruption of moral character a little bit is kind of contrary to that typical hero's journey that we're used to.
Yeah,
Like it,
that's a theme of pretty much the entirety of Frank Herbert's books in the Dune universe
yeah,
of don't trust charismatic leaders.
yeah, that's what, and I got that reading the book. So a way I have been thinking about because like I truly reading the book and then watching this movie back to back, I'm really glad I did it that way. Because I just feel like I'm able to see the whole picture. The way I've been thinking about it is the book to me feels like a page of a coloring book where there's a beautiful image on the piece of paper and then the movie colors in the lines.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's how this combo feels, because when you're reading the second half of the book, essentially the big plot points that happen in this movie, like Paul riding the sandworm, Paul becoming Lisan Al Gaib, drinking the water of life, and then them raiding Arrakeen, like each chapter is each of those events. There's not really a ton of in between. Um, and if there are other big moments that were just cut out of this movie. Like I'll talk about one later, but
Well, there's even that section in the book where it switches from like part 1 to 2 or part 2 to 3, where they have like that exposition sentence of like Muad'Dib's been hunting us for 2 years,
yeah,
and you're like, oh, okay, 2 years has passed. So it's just
yes, that's a
the
good
two
point.
years Paul
The
becoming a Fremen in the books
yes,
doesn't exist in this.
no, it doesn't.
It's
Yeah,
like 6 months because Alia still hasn't been born yet.
Right, and that's what was confusing to Emily is like, especially the like, and even Milo, but like so much happens, but also this baby has not been born. And it's like, so wait, how much has happened, and is that too fast or too? Yeah, so
well, yeah, because essentially this is really interesting. So the choice basically to make Alia be a child in the womb, not a child born.
mm-hmm.
I think it might have affected the whole way this movie is structured,
Yeah,
Mhm.
because
it sounds like it.
that's what I'm realizing now, which is fascinating. Because to your point earlier, I can see there needing to be more time to understand uh just how like entrenched Paul is in the Fremen life. You know what I mean? Like,
Right,
Yeah.
like I love all the scenes of the stuff that we see, and I think like him riding the sandworm does feel like a huge moment, and it's earned. But I'm
yeah,
like, I want even more, because Emily was saying to me that she was reading more. That apparently you learn that the Fremen are up to more than just like fighting the Harkonnens to limit spice production, but they're also like trying to get like greenery and
yep,
like civilization
Mhm.
returned to Arrakis. Spoilers,
yes,
sorry.
Yeah, and they only hinted that a little bit with like the planetary outpost in the first
in the
one
first movie, yeah,
With
where
Dr. Kynes, right?
yeah,
yep,
where Duncan goes in and is thinking there's some plants here, this is crazy.
yeah,
And then obviously we see the water in the siege.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And
It's
so
a way,
I think seeing more of that context of like there's more going on than just them punching the Harkonnens, like
yeah.
Mhm.
would make it not like better or worse, but like more rich and complicated.
That's actually something I thought I wish was fleshed out more in the first movie, because the first part of the book spends a lot more time talking about the planetology
Mm-hmm.
of Dune, and
Mhm.
how there is actually potential for like when Paul at the end of this movie, when Paul is saying I will lead you into paradise, that's supposed to mean more than just like free from your oppressor. That's supposed
Yeah.
to mean like flourishing natural life on Arrakis. And
Because
I don't, I don't know that communicates that well in this movie.
That's kind of what he says to Stilgar when he pretty much sees his power and is telling everybody their thoughts and their pasts, and Stilgar is standing there and he's like, "What do you see?" And Paul says, "I see a green paradise." Stilgar like loses his mind.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, he's the Lisan Al Gaib.
Yes.
And they have the dream sequence with Alia standing on the shores talking to Paul,
Yes.
where it's like water
Yep.
next to desert.
Okay, so I was thinking that was a mental juxtaposition of Caladan and Dune or in Arrakis.
So
But
was I. But
maybe that was supposed to be
I mean, that's
future
what it could have
Arrakis.
been too.
Okay.
I think it was a future Arrakis starting the transformation.
Okay. Interesting.
But it might not have been. You know,
yeah.
oh no, I have to go watch Dune 2 again to see what I think.
oh darn.
Oh darn. I force me if you have to.
Maybe in IMAX this time. I don't know.
No, for real though. I think I have to see this movie in IMAX. I think I might have to see this movie in IMAX. This is like this is one of the few movies that I think it's actually worth the cost of the ticket. You know what I mean?
Hey Josh, let me throw this out there real quick live. I'm going to be in Richmond first weekend in April.
Oh, will it still be in IMAX that far away? Do we think
this movie will be in theaters for forever?
It will. It will.
I don't know if it'll be in IMAX. What?
But let's pitch it. Let's pitch it to Denis. You know, we'll soften him up with the story of our friendship and see if he leaves it out there in IMAX for a month for us.
There we go. There we go.
All right.
Hey, buddy, we're gonna get you like another $50.
We know you need that. How about the Paul and Chani relationship?
So I thought I remember reading an interview or seeing an interview thing with Denis where he was like, their love story is like the anchor of this whole thing, and that I actually view this movie as like as much the Paul and Chani story as it is Paul's thing. And I think Chani gets the best character work of any character in this movie for me, because she goes through like 2 character arcs where she's like, man, this guy sucks because he's an outsider. But then once he's like, hey, actually, I agree that like you all need to save yourselves, don't need to rely on a prophecy. She's like, oh, actually, I kind of like him now. Then falls in love with him. And then when sees what he becomes, falls out of love with him. Like, I think that is such a complex journey to condense into under 3 hours. And I think the writing and Denis and Zendaya's performance communicate all of that pretty perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
From a character standpoint, her journey was the one that felt the most fleshed out to me leaving the theater.
Yeah, they added a lot to Chani's character from the book, because in the book she doesn't really do a lot. So I think she was like a standout part of the movie, and I think one of what is probably, I'm just guessing, is one of Emily and Matt's problems with the movie is, you said something about the swerve where he walks up to Chani and says something and then immediately turns around and is like, hey, princess.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
Yep.
I think they should have had like an off to the side line where Paul pretty much tells her what he tells her in the book, just not in front of everybody like he tells her in the book.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, I enjoyed their relationship, and just the kind of like, she's almost treating him like a little lost puppy at the beginning, and then she figures out like, oh, hey, he's not horrible. And then, like Trent was saying, they kind of slowly fall in love over the course of 6 months or so. 6 to 7 months.
It's a quick turnaround. Turnaround, and no child too. I think that's another important thing. The fact that they don't have a child together. That's almost like a binding union. It almost serves as like a marriage for them in the book that they have a child together. Mm-hmm. But to me, I loved the relationship in this movie. I felt like there's not really a lot of romance in the book between these 2 characters, and I felt like this is what I mean, like the coloring in between the lines, like this is what I would imagine happened that the book doesn't cover, because the book doesn't really give them time to develop a romantic relationship like they do in this movie, I feel like.
And they give more depth to her character by almost like splitting the Fremen up culturally from like the North and the South.
I'm glad you brought this up.
Where she is kind of against the prophecy
Yes.
in the movie, whereas in the book she's like, "He's the Messiah. I'm with the Messiah."
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
I love that.
But yeah,
I'm so glad that they decided to add some incongruency between the Fremen. Like the book treats them as this like-minded people all across, but we know that's not how any group of people is in real life. There's always going to be incongruency in how people think, and I love that there's a clear divide between the true believers and like the agnostics in the society.
Well, no, because
um
that's the great scene in the movie where like Jessica drinks the well of life, and then she's like, Chani's like, we shouldn't rely on prophecy, and he Paul's like, yeah, she's right, it's fake. They're trained to like handle poison or whatever, and that's
yeah,
like her first time. She's like, oh, I like he agrees with me. That's interesting.
and then
yeah,
And then
yeah,
right
Javier
after,
Bardem's instantly like, he's too proud to admit that he is who he is.
Yes!
Only the Lisan Al Galib would be too like humble to admit that he's the Lisan Al Galib.
Yeah, it's
Like,
so good.
that was like the funniest line of the entire movie because it just cuts to it after he
Yes,
said, he's
yes.
like, he's too humble
yeah, yeah.
to say he
Javier
is,
Javier
which
Bardem
means he
is
is.
also like he might
Oh,
steal the movie.
he's
in the running.
balling in this movie. He's so good.
And I was talking to a coworker today of Stilgar in this movie, hilarious.
Yes,
And
yes.
not
Incredible.
because he was trying to crack jokes or anything.
No,
He was incredible comic relief that didn't feel like a cartoon character.
right.
Because the way he was delivering lines, like when Paul takes control of the Fremen and he just freaks out and starts screaming Lisan al Gaib.
Yes.
And the thing he says, he's like, he's too humble, which means, of course. He's sitting there, the sandworms going by. He's like, it's as it was written.
Yes,
Or
yes.
there's
This
like the
is
scene.
amazing.
There's the scene where like Paul runs out to distract the ornithopter so Chani could shoot it down, and they're like, only he would be willing to sacrifice himself, but he was trying to stay behind cover, and the
Yeah.
thing just moved, and Paul was like, no, like that's not what I wanted to
By
happen.
the way, that sequence, incredible.
The action in this movie is so good, and I was so proud of this movie because I was getting nervous when the final battle was going to happen. I was like, action fatigue could set in here.
Yeah.
But they just do that one awesome tracking shot of Chani like going through like 15 dudes, and then it's like
Yes.
over, and then it just moves
Yep.
inside. And
Yep.
I'm like, great job, Denis. Like you knew that we couldn't handle a 45-minute sequence outside.
Yeah, it didn't. The movie didn't need it.
No.
It really didn't.
It establishes that the Fremen are basically like the best fighters in the universe so far,
Yes.
or that we've met, and so it's like you don't need to see them win. We know that they win. Like
Because it sets it up, too, because we see in the first movie, the Harkonnens come in and the Atreides are like kind of wiping them out, and then the Sardaukar come in and they wipe out the Atreides.
yeah.
And then you see the Fremen come in and it's even more of a wipeout on the Sardaukar by the Fremen than what they did to the Atreides in the first movie.
Yeah.
And you've kind of got the end of the movie too, where they're burning the Harkonnens like they were burning the Atreides at the beginning of the movie.
I know. Yes, that's a great distinction.
Yeah.
I love that too. Something they did really well in this movie, I feel like, is to kind of pinpoint that fighting strategy of the Fremen. Like they have home field advantage every single time, and they use the planet to their advantage. Like the fact that they blow up the city of Arrakeen by basically just taking out a mountain behind it is genius, and I loved it because then one of the coolest shots to me is after all the rubble crashes and it's just like thick dust and sand everywhere in the sky, and you see the Sardaukar raising the flags that are like drenched in mud, and there's like no sunlight around, and then all of a sudden the army starts like creeping in. It's like, it's such a good shot and such a great like depiction of the Fremen.
And then the way they had showed like the Sardaukar come in as this big, powerful fighting force, and then the sandworms come in and they're like crapping themselves, running away.
Yes. Oh, it's so good.
So this is what these like super soldiers feel when they see the Fremen coming in.
Yeah.
Because all the Fremen, like this, because, you know, you've got this like three-pronged attack where like an army of Fremen come in on sandworms, and then Paul comes in from somewhere else, and Gurney comes in from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And they're just wiping them out.
Yeah.
I loved it. Another quick shot I'm thinking of as we talk about all these things is like the something that really really like sold me on the Paul Chani relationship is her teaching him how to sandwalk properly.
It's a
Mhm.
great little scene.
And when
'Cause
he's like
he's like, the book said to do this, and
literally
she's
the
like,
audiobooks told me, and she's just the
she's like, are you
deadpan
literally trying to
stare.
tell me who lives here, like how to do
Right,
this?
right. It's
Are
so
you really
classic.
sansplaining to me?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's literally what's
Sansplaining.
happening.
Oh, that's great. Oh, that's amazing.
No, it's such a great moment.
Um, how we've talked a little bit about it. What are y'all's thoughts on the what the movie's trying to say? I think about this whole like prophecy versus it's the classic debate of like uh prophecy or what do you call it? What's the word
Like
I'm
free
trying to
will
think of?
versus determinism.
Thank you. That's exactly, yeah. Free will versus determinism.
Yeah,
Um,
I was sitting here and being like, oh, this movie has a very, in my mind, watching it, like a very cynical view on
mhm.
like religion and faith. Because like basically the way I'm reading the movie is like the movie says that it's like it's just the gosh, I'm afraid the name of the witches.
Bene
Like
Gesserit.
The Bene
yeah,
Gesserit.
yeah, it's like it's the Bene Gesserit doing
Yep.
shenanigans. Like it's just
Yep.
all shenanigans. And like they always have contingency plans because they have like Austin Butler, and then like he has a child, I guess, that'll come back in Dune Messiah or whatever.
Nope.
No,
Nope.
okay, they're just gonna drop
Oh,
that
that's
plot thread.
interesting. Okay, I was curious about that.
So yeah, it was interesting. But I like it. I found it engaging that Paul's like, I don't really believe this, but
Yeah.
I have to do this to win. Like I think that's an interesting paradox that Paul makes his peace with, I guess. Like
Yeah, Joseph, you're more well versed in the lore here, so you have it's we because Trent, I feel pretty similar to you in terms of what we know right now.
yeah.
What is there stuff that you know, Joseph, that would make you feel differently?
So there's like, I mean, I agree with Trent that this movie's mad cynical on religion and talking about how religion can be used to control the masses.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if it goes so far to say get rid of it all, but it's more of just a be careful.
Yeah.
And there's a few different candidates to be the Messiah, you know, the Kwisatz Haderach. Fade is kind of one of them, but he wasn't really the one they wanted. They wanted one more generation. So they wanted Jessica to have a daughter first instead of Paul. And then they were going to have Fade and that daughter get together to create the Kwisatz Haderach. There's a character too that was not in the movie, but is related to a character in the movie, is Lady Fenring's husband, who was potentially going to be played by Tim Blake Nelson before he got cut.
Interesting.
But he was like a weird failed genetic experiment that Paul also knew was kind of like his equal. But,
all right, so sorry, keep going.
But I mean, I don't think they were planning on a Bene Gesserit betraying the order, which is pretty much what Jessica does.
Yeah, like in this movie, we're saying, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because to me, this whole theme, it's fascinating to me because if you go back to the first movie and the first part of the book, the Reverend Mother, that's situated with the Emperor, is really like kind of still condemning Jessica for even birthing Paul in the first place.
Yeah.
And for Paul to then become well then you go back to I think a really important line in the movie where I think it's Chani and Paul talking, and she's talking about prophecy, like it's all fake. Prophecy is the only purpose is to keep keep people waiting around in the same spot. And you can see why they would do that. You can see why the Bene Gesserit would do that from a power grab standpoint. Like, we know Spice runs this universe, so we're going to spread these prophecies to keep the Fremen in place on Arrakis and
And
not interfere with spice flow.
and the thing too is it's not just the Fremen. They've like planted these Bene Gesserit legends
True.
and prophecies to all the different cultures of the universe and tweaked them a little bit. But for the Fremen, it's like, oh, what do the Fremen want? Oh, they want Arrakis to be a paradise. So the Lisan al Gaib is going to come in and deliver you to paradise. And so they're kind of pulling strings everywhere.
They are, and I think that's. But what's so fascinating to me is that the prophecy they chose to keep these people oppressed actually comes to life and is what spawns this whole holy war. Like that's incredibly ironic and in a way just hilarious to look at the Bene Gesserit that way. And I love the way that story has played out.
And we're getting a TV show about them too. So
that's right.
Right.
That's right. We are
keep changing it around and rejigging the production team, but I think it's still in development.
I'd be really excited to see that series. I feel like I could say this is a cynical depiction of religion, but I also think it's there's truth to the charismatic leader warning, you know? Like I see I feel like that's the heart of it in a way, like because I have a feeling we're going to get to a place with Paul where kind of where he's at the I mean if we're looking at where Paul's at the end of this movie, to me I see him as fully believing that he is the prophet, the Lisan al Gaib and the Kwisatz Haderach. Like I feel like he's fully bought in and believe that. Do y'all feel that way?
I think that's what the movie wants us to think, at least right now.
I think he thinks he's enough of it because he's kind of seen the future, and he's like, okay, I see where some of this is lining up.
Yeah. The book depiction to me felt different than the way he feels at the end of this book or end of this movie. At the end of this movie, I feel like he's totally sold, totally bought in on he is the one.
And he seems, because obviously Chani leaves at the end of the movie,
right?
He seems alone, almost at the end of the at the end of the movie, even with all the Fremen crazy sauce dudes going out to kill everybody. But it's like he doesn't really get along with his mom.
Nope.
Because of the nonsense she was pulling, and Gurney is treating him more as like the emperor than as his friend.
Yep.
And Chani leaves, so he seems kind of isolated.
Yep. Which is not a great place to be, as we know. Who do y'all think the villain of this movie is?
I mean, you could make a strong case that I think it's Jessica.
Interesting.
In a lot of ways.
Why? So what's the case for Jessica?
So, well, and I have questions about this, so maybe y'all can clarify. So, like, and this is one of Emily's things too. So they go back to the siege.
Yep.
And they're like, hey, our person's dying. You got to take on this role. Are these Bene Gesserit women as well? Or are these separate mystic? Okay, they are Bene Gesserit.
Yes. Yeah, so their Reverend Mother is a Bene Gesserit plant on Arrakis.
Okay. And so she drinks the liquid thing, the well of life, and then like she is herself, but she's also like possessed by all of the lives that came before her. Yeah? Something like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All the Reverend Mothers.
Yep.
And then from that point on, she's like, hey, I'm going to let my son like destroy the universe because I think that's like his or remake the universe, I guess, is what she thinks.
Yeah.
But I think it goes back to that amazing part in part 1 where Leto's like, will you protect our son? And she's like, with my life. And he's like, I'm not asking his mother, I'm asking the Bene Gesserit. And it's like, ooh. And I feel like Jessica in this movie tilts the scales to the Bene Gesserit side as opposed to being the mother side, because Paul's happy just being with the Fremen on Arrakis.
I think Jessica actually, she legitimately loved Leto.
Yes.
And figured out that they pretty much all got set up by, we find out in this movie, the Bene Gesserit. And I guess she kind of figures that out when she drinks the water of life and gets all the memories. Mm-hmm. And she might just be like, you know what? I'm just tired of everybody.
Yeah.
Paul's the least on Al Gaib. Or we have to say that to make sure they don't kill him.
Yes.
So let's just go kill everybody.
I mean, kind of. Well, and the thing is, I felt like Jessica in the book is more hesitant to Paul becoming Lisan Al Gaib than she is in this movie. So I'm viewing her as a villain in this movie because there's no hesitancy there. She is like actively talking to her baby in the halls of the siege, being like, we gotta spread the word. We gotta evangelize essentially to the rest of this tribe that like Paul is the one.
Let's go get the weak, dumb ones first,
right?
And build it out.
It's very intentional, very systematic. Like
yes,
and,
extremely.
And then, like, baby Ali is saying, "That's a good plan, Mom. Let's do it."
Yes.
So she's like an in the womb psychopath,
right? Yeah, that was kind of crazy to me too.
That was another thing too. I don't know if they explained it, and I can't remember that what happens to Jessica of getting all of the Reverend Mother's memories also happens to Alia.
Yes.
So Alia is like a Reverend Mother baby.
A Reverend Mother as a infant baby, not even born yet.
Preborn. And they say it at the end of the movie, the abomination.
That's right. They do.
I thought that was in reference to Paul, though. Was that not?
Wait a second.
Because Paul uses
I thought it was in...
Because Paul uses the voice on the Reverend Mother, and she says that. So I thought it was in relation to him, but you're saying no.
She senses the presence of the abomination.
Oh.
Which, I mean, that makes sense because the Reverend Mother on Arrakis says that, like, oh, crap, she's pregnant. Like, what did we do?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I view Jessica completely as a villain in this story. However, the movie seems to want to place Fade Rotha and the Harkonnens as the villain. So
that's what I was gonna say. Like, obviously, there's more transparently evil characters. Like the Harkonnens are obviously like greedy, but like also they're like Fade is like a psychopath. Like, so it's like he's evil, but he has no broader goals in the movie. To me, it seems like.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this. Like, what was y'all's impression of Fade Rotha?
So Austin Butler, first of all, killed it. Like, I did not know if Elvis was going to have this level of range in him.
Yeah,
but he did. I like Emily, Matt, and I all had the same criticism of this one. Like, no disrespect to Dave Bautista at all. Love Dave, but like, why is that character in either of these movies? I would much rather we got double the Fade and get Dave Bautista out of here altogether.
You feel like he's not important enough?
What he beats up a dude throwing him into a console and then as a moron and then dies like that's it.
Well, that was kind of the point of Raban in the books too.
Okay.
He's supposed to be a moron, I think.
Okay.
So Raban, and this isn't excusing the movie for not explaining it. The Baron had a plan for Raban and Fade of Raban is going to be an idiot. And then Fade is going to come in and be the savior on Arrakis.
Oh, so this was always the long con.
Yeah, Fade was going to come in and be like the benevolent ruler that takes out Raban.
Okay,
but I do.
But they don't. They don't.
Yeah, the movie doesn't even hint at that, right? Like,
yeah, that is straight up a book thing. The movie doesn't say that.
But I think the movie could have benefited from that because
100%.
Because I just don't like. To me, the biggest. Because I had heard chatter before I went and saw it last night that like Austin Butler, freaking awesome, like incredible villain. And I gotta be honest, like I love Austin Butler and I thought he was great and like really having the time of his life. Like Austin Butler was having so much fun in this movie.
And so much. seemingly too much at times.
Right, exactly. And like, but I just feel like it didn't match what the character was. Here's what I think the character of Fade Rotha eventually is just a physical representation of the Harkonnens. You know, like this murderous sociopath, uh, like giving himself over to every temptation known to man, whether it be sexual or drugs or murder. And basically, with Fade Rotha, I just felt like the great like the eccentric performance of Austin Butler didn't match the character's true like importance to the movie, because really I feel like he's there just to lose to Paul in battle at the end. I don't know. Did y'all feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like he is effective in that, like, I can buy, if I didn't know how stories work, that, like, there's a 50-50 shot that he wins that fight at the end. Like, if I didn't know that Paul was
Yeah.
supposed to win, I could buy that Fade actually would beat him because he is shown to be so cunning and vicious.
Yes.
So I do think he serves that part well, but yeah, it's like I don't get why the Reverend Mothers thought like that he could be manipulated into being like the actual chosen one. I know they say the line of like, well, we can manipulate him with like sex and stuff, but I'm like, but yeah, he's also crazy. So like, I
Yeah.
still feel like even if he tried to do that, eventually he would go off the handle and just do whatever he wanted.
I don't think they wanted to manipulate him into being the Kwisatz Haderach. I think they wanted to manipulate him into being like the father of the Kwisatz Haderach and taking his genetic material.
So is that why Lady Margot Fenring goes to seduce him?
Yeah. So
Gotcha.
she goes to like make an assessment on him. He passes the Gom Jabbar test.
He does.
Because remember, she says like put your hand in the box, and then she says the line like the genetic line is secure, of her being pregnant with Fade's kid. I thought one of the interesting things about Fade that we don't really see with many of the other Harkonnens is like his demented sense of honor almost. Like he kills the Atreides in the arena and is like, "Good job, buddy. You were a worthy opponent."
Yep.
And then when Paul kills him, he says, "You fought well, Atreides."
Yep.
So it's kind of weird. He's a weird hairless cannibal guy.
Okay. Also,
and then he also compliments good opponents.
Yep. He's a warrior, so I guess I can get it on that on that length. But something that I legit was laughing. I couldn't help myself when he throws Rabin to the ground and it's like, kiss my foot. I was losing it. I don't know why that got me so much. I'm just like,
so
he's a madman.
There was a thing, I honestly don't remember if it was in the book or not, but it was almost like they implied he did that because Raban had done that to him before, is what I got out of it.
Okay, that makes sense.
He like threw Raban to the ground.
Okay.
And it was some line he said in the movie that made it seem like Raban had done that to like little kid.
Oh,
Fade.
I see.
And
okay.
I don't remember what the line was, but it was almost like he was getting back at him.
Okay, I
interesting.
buy that.
Yeah, I could totally buy that.
I think we have to. Don't quote me on that of like that being definitely the case, but that was the sense I got from it.
Also, on a similar tangent,
yeah,
I saw someone like, I think on Letterboxd review, like weirdly an incestual movie for there to be no incest. Freaking the Baron freaking on the mouth kissing his nephew Fade Rotha.
So apparently that was improvised by either Austin or Stellan.
Was it really?
And you can tell. I feel like Austin reaches to pull him in, and you can see Stellan like hesitate for like half a second.
Oh my gosh! I bet you're right. That
sounds like something you would see in a blooper reel where they immediately start laughing, except they played it straight.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess they didn't play it straight, but that was a weird line. And yeah, I mean, with the way they cross the bloodlines, sometimes there's.
I was going to say, I feel like the Bene Gesserits are dipping their toes in the incest water is a little
Well, I
too.
saw somebody post about part one online. Like, there's the scene where Paul and Jessica are gonna change into the still suits, and like they both like turn away, but then like look back at each other for half a second, and it's like nothing is said and nothing is done, but there's a weird pause between Paul and Jessica if you go rewatch that scene.
I
Like,
mean, they're not like the Benny Lannisters, but they're there's some weirdness going on.
yeah, there's definitely
Oh,
some weird vibes.
there's a whole lot of weirdness going on in this movie.
Just wait, just wait.
What what so I feel like the thing that we haven't talked about yet that needs to be talked about is the everything technical about this movie.
Yeah,
From the cinematography to the sound design to the editing, like what stood out to you? Because to me this is like a 10 out of 10. I've never seen anything like it.
yeah. I mean, it's really the sandworm ride for me
Oh
first.
man, yes. Can we
Like,
please talk about that sequence?
because for my Dolby Atmos screening, like it moved, the sound design moved speakers depending on where the worm was for
That's
my
nuts.
theater. So if it was like more in front of you, it was in front of you. If not, it was behind and stuff like that. So that made the thing so much more visceral. And anytime like sandworms were around on, like, even if you didn't see them on screen, you're like the seats were vibrating a little bit.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
yeah, it was pretty impressive stuff. Yeah, that and then the Fade Coliseum fight being all in infrared were like the two things.
Mhm.
I was like, oh, I've never seen something done like this. Well, kind of similar to the one scene in Love and Thunder when they go fight Gore
Oh yeah.
on the moon thing.
Yeah, it weirdly made more sense than that because they were like, "Behold this fight under a glorious black sun," and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that makes total sense."
Well, Denis was talking about it, and he was like, you want the visual palette to represent, like, to inform how the characters feel about the world." And so
Yeah.
it's like,
Mhm.
what would make the Harkonnens cruel besides being just in a black world, literally? And it's just like life and death in black and white all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
And
viewing the world through a monochromatic morality sense. So I was like,
it's
okay,
their
Denis, like, you know what you're talking about.
That
it's
is
their whole color
brilliant.
palette. It's their whole color palette too when they leave Gady Prime
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
there's a little bit you can tell that's not in black and white, but they're really pale and don't have any hair, which is kind of wild because Josh, you read the books and like the Baron has like red hair and wears
Yes.
a
Yes.
blue and orange outfit or something in the books.
Denis was just like, no hair for you.
But
It's yeah. I that worm sequence, Trent, that you mentioned.
So cool.
I just like it's one of the moments that I just cherish watching. You cherish those moments watching movies, especially in the theater. I like legitimately I think it's one of my favorite movie scenes
Yeah.
because there is something uh they they do such a good job of making you feel like you are in the movie because the camera being behind Paul and his figure being kind of blurry as you see this giant cloud of sand in the distance and it just starts creeping closer and closer and then like I expected a lot of times something like that where you can't like how do you create a great grandfather or whatever it was sandworm, how
Yeah.
do you recreate
Mhm.
that and make it look real? Most I feel like anytime train sequences, things of where people are running and jumping platform to platform, there's a lot of edits and
Mhm.
this was just like very lightly edited of Paul running along the dune to go catch this worm. So you're like, oh my gosh, like you feel the urgency of like, bro, go, you gotta hop on before this thing makes it through.
Yeah.
And then when he gets onto the body of the worm itself, and there's just like you can see the sand collapsing on him.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I was mesmerized. I
No,
was
it's so
mesmerized.
good.
The
Yeah.
technical thing that stood out the most to me is something I think we've noticed more with like the advent of the volume is the
Mhm.
lighting of it. Of
Yes.
there was no scene in the movie that I looked at and thought this is lit on a soundstage or in the
Yeah.
volume.
Mhm.
It was so crazy how they lit it and it looked real because you can tell like you can definitely tell in like the Marvel movies, even the really good ones, from like the lighting where it was shot.
Yeah.
And this one, it was almost like they just set cameras down on Arrakis because
Yeah.
nothing looked fake. It didn't have that kind of rubbery feel of light. And even when the Emperor's like shiny chrome ship comes down, it looked like a real reflection coming off of it.
Yeah.
And
I thought that was really impressive.
It was. I don't know. It was just, I'm not as technical minded as you guys, but the lighting of the movie really stood out to me.
No, and that's like people say with CGI, that's like the hardest thing to replicate is like the sunlight of where you film stuff. And that's why when it looks fake, that's usually why, is that the shadow or the point source is off.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And there wasn't like any of that in the movie. I know if you guys have seen the continuity error of the worm riding scene where Paul's goggles are off and then they're on, but
interesting.
That's just a little minor thing. And
it's fine.
The look of it with the lighting is, this dude's really riding a worm. Look at the shadows on the worm. Look how, because you can also tell a difference between like the lights surrounding us right now, like the light bulbs and stuff. You can tell a difference between that and sunlight.
Yeah.
And it looks like sunlight in the movie. It doesn't look like they're holding
It
up.
does.
Which I'm sure they are holding up, different lights, but it doesn't look like they are.
Yeah.
Do we know where they filmed this?
I think in Jordan or Budapest. Okay. Like I feel like Jordan and Budapest a lot of the time.
Okay. How about let's talk about. Sorry, go ahead, Joseph.
But then even when you switch to the Emperor's planet, totally different.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like ecology, the lighting is still perfect.
Yeah, because it's like that looks almost like coast of Italy or some European inspired architecture over there.
Yeah.
Anti-Arrakis, pretty much.
Yeah. Let's talk about the score and the sound design. A separate piece of technical filming, like, oh my gosh, like.
Yeah, I mean, Hans already won an Oscar for this for part one, and the Academy doesn't usually give it out for sequels because they recycle so many themes or versions of themes. So I doubt he'll win again, but it's still really good.
But there were new themes.
Yeah, there were.
It was the kind of the driving theme of this movie was like the Paul and Chani love theme.
That theme is
beautiful.
That so I've been listening to since like a week before the movie came out, because I saw the soundtrack came out and like, I got to listen.
It dropped
to this.
early,
and it was different but the same. But then you have the when he's holding on to the side of the sandworm and it spins up and it hits that like melodic section where the woman is singing.
Yeah.
And it's the same kind of tone and tenor to it, but different words.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because that's I watched part one with the captions on, and that is called like the lamenting music in the first
lamentation
movie.
Music.
Yeah, the lamentation music.
No, not the return of ancient lamentation.
I think of the Snyder Cut every time I see that subtitle.
But it's interesting because they flipped it with the same melody but different words in this movie to be the like ascension of Paul. I love that. I love the theme as well. I think there's the Paul Chani theme, because I think there's a moment in the movie where it's used, because I was listening to the soundtrack today, where they merge the like flute or whatever instrument is being used to like play over all of the Arrakis sounds. They like blend it with the bagpipes that are associated with Caladan, and it's just amazing. It's like the perfect way to depict their relationship through music. I love it. I love that soundtrack. And then the sound design, just in terms of like I feel like there's hardly actually there are some moments. What I was going to say is there are hardly any moments where it is silent, and when it is silent, it's blaringly obvious. Like, did y'all feel that way?
Well, yeah, because like there's the awesome device that they use to summon the sandworms, and then like everything of him repositioning like the pickaxes on the sandworm, that sounds just incredible.
Yes.
But then for the final duel, there's no big sounds except the punches between Paul and Thade. Like it's just them, and then Paul does that sick backflip twisty thing that I was like, oh, that
The
Um,
the like grunting that was going on in that final fight scene. Haley was sitting next to me like, "Oh my gosh, make it stop!" It's
yeah,
just like
And
because it was just filling the room.
but
yeah,
we can talk about those two things together too, because there was like no score for that scene.
yeah.
Mm-mm.
The score was
No,
gone,
yeah, completely.
and it worked because
Yes,
if you remember, I know I said I wouldn't trash this movie anymore, but the duel between Rey and Kylo Ren on the Death Star,
it'll
no
never
music,
stop.
and it
Yeah.
does not work. This
No.
one,
Oh yes, I forgot. Oh, I hate that scene.
this one, no music, and it's perfect because
Yeah.
it builds the tension so much.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then you kind of have after the duel is when the music rises up, and you're like, "Oh, this is scary music. They're about to kill
Yep.
everybody."
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
it makes it work because you have this kind of build up musically with like the battle to get into Arakeen. I think that's how you say it, and kind of the little music that's more quiet and little lived in sounds like sand blowing
Yeah.
and things like that. But then this end fight, like you were saying, punches, a couple of falls, some knife contact. But other than that, it's not really any music going.
No.
And it's effective sound design where they're not just putting sounds in.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly. It's natural. The thing that always I found extremely effective because of how unsettling it is, but like any I think is it called prescience, Joseph? The like vision seeing into the future and past, like any of those scenes or the water of life where it's like uh Aaliyah becoming awake inside of the womb, the like random amalgamation of like whispered tones of words from the Bene
Mm-hmm.
Gesserit, which is from
Yeah.
generations, is just
So
so
creepy.
creepy. And it
So
just
creepy.
like fills the whole theater. It's so creepy and unsettling, and it's supposed to be. So
And
yeah.
then Jessica using the voice after taking the water of life.
Oh my gosh.
It doesn't
Oh
just sound like a weird robot hiss thing. It's like you hear multiple voices
yep.
coming out.
Yeah.
And
It
then
sounds like a possession in a horror movie.
yeah, and then sometimes Jessica is speaking and then sometimes Alia starts speaking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's super creepy. But like the probably the scariest one, or I guess it was a couple of them, of when she tells the lady at the Water of Life temple to give it to Paul, she's like, "Do it!" And you
Yeah.
hear all of these weird voices. And then after Paul takes the Water of Life and she's telling him to go find Chani, she's like, "Find the girl."
Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
And then when
terrifying.
Chani doesn't want to cry and revive Paul, and she's like, "Do it." Have
Yeah.
the voice thing going. But it was even that sound design was creepy because you could still kind of hear Jessica in it, but it
Yep.
was like she was being repressed.
Yeah, that was truly terrifying. Yeah. Um I'm trying to think like what there's some I feel like one of the main characters in this movie we haven't talked about is Gurney Halleck. Gurney Halleck returns from the
With his
sand
battle
like
set.
with his battle set. I loved it. I love that we saw the battle set.
Mm-hmm.
I love Josh Brolin's portrayal of this character. Think
Yeah.
he's
I mean, I my one thing with it is I felt like the movie had him like respawn when like the movie needed him to. Like I feel like he
interesting.
just showed up. I was like, Paul didn't run into him before, or they didn't like mention like, oh hey, there's somebody smuggling spice that isn't the Harkonnens. Like I found it weird that the movie just like randomly drops seemingly Brolin
Yeah.
into the movie.
That's kind of how it happened in the book, from what
It
I remember.
is.
He
Okay.
just shows up in one chapter, and Paul says, "Oh, hey, look at that guy."
Yeah,
But I
I don't
think
know. I don't need like a 10-minute scene, but I like maybe just like a hint of some like that there's somebody else out there doing stuff. Like I don't know, just
yeah, that's a good point. Like I because I think that because the book is structured that way, Joseph, where like honestly a lot of things just happen and you
Mm-hmm.
kind of have to catch up. The movie doesn't always do the back work of that a movie needs to do of explaining why things are happening. So like Gurney Halleck showing up is one of those examples. Another
And
example. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, and they take out what is probably Gurney's most important plot line in the book too, of
Yes.
the traitor storyline.
Yes.
So Trent Gurney knows that there was a traitor in the Atreides house. He
Mm.
doesn't know that it was Dr. Yue.
Okay.
So he meets Paul as like, man, if I ever see this dude's mom, I'm going to kill her because she's the traitor. And he rolls into the siege and is about to kill Jessica.
Like knife to the throat. Like,
And
Oh,
Paul's like, she's not the traitor. And he's like, shut up, she's the traitor.
which is, I'm glad you brought this up because I was kind of mad they didn't have that scene in there. But that leads right into the water of life. And that's another point in the movie where to me, it felt unnatural that Paul all of a sudden wanted to go drink the water of life.
This is what I mean about like maybe splitting up the movie into 3 is like once the movie has Paul decide that he's gonna go south, like things just happen.
Yes.
Even faster than they've been happening before. It's just like he's like, I'm going, I'm drinking, I am this thing. Like mount up troops, Broncos country, let's ride one last time.
Even though not anymore.
Not anymore.
Broncos country.
That does feel just super accelerated, and like I don't want anything different. Like I don't know how to. I just want like a little breathing room, and it feels weird to say that in a movie that's almost 3 hours, but I think it needs it.
I agree. I think there was definitely some needed breathing room with. I felt like we got it with Paul and Chani. But
yes, that feels totally earned.
But I think there's a lot we didn't get it with. Something else that sorry, go ahead, Joseph. I keep cutting you off.
I think, and I'm not trying to make excuses for the movie, I think they rely a lot on the implied Paul sees a future where he has to take the water of life. Jessica sees a path where he has to take the water of life. Alia says, go take the water of life. But I don't think they say it as much of it's a switch in Paul saying, okay, I'll finally go do it, which is what I think baby Leto dying could have been the driving force for him to do.
Yes. That would have been a great repositioning of that moment as well.
Like I feel like what the movie wants it to be is that when he realizes that the Harkonnens are just gonna nuke everything or like laser everything, is that he's like, oh, Chani, like you're gonna die if I don't do something here. And I think that's also supposed to explain his whole thing to her, where he's like, I'm gonna go marry Florence Pugh, but I do still love you, and that's why I did all of this. I think that's what the movie wants to say, but I don't know if it says it fully.
Well, there's the scene. I forgot about the scene, but he's envisioning Chani being blown up, and it's when they blow up the siege, and that essentially leads him into the water of life. It's
okay,
but that's very minimal.
That's blink and you miss it kind of territory.
Yes.
So
yeah, exactly. Something that I was thinking about at the end of this movie, that this goes back to part 1. I think that we didn't get, or maybe I'll ask this to y'all first. Like, did you all feel the strong, I guess, character of Duke Leto in the first movie, that this guy is like a good leader?
Yes, I was actually going to make the comparison on this pod.
I'm so eager. I think I'm thinking of the same thing you are.
That like you could make like the Qui-Gon Jinn versus Obi-Wan argument with like if Leto is alive, everything is fine. And the moment Leto dies is where it really goes all off the tracks. The movie can say it's something else, the book can say it's something else, but it's really Leto's death that like fully puts everything where it ends up here.
I was hoping you were going to say Qui-Gon. Trent, I was legit thinking of that before we hopped on. Like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to bring this up. He's the Qui-Gon of this universe. Is great point. But I felt like, yeah, maybe we needed a little bit more understanding, because the Emperor says like your father was like had a good heart essentially, and
he believes in the powers of the heart or something.
Yeah,
and nobody that can lead or something.
Yep.
And I think that was a way in the movie to set up the Fade and Paul duel, because Paul was like, I have the power here, you just trashed on my dad who you got killed, so I'm going to kill you. But it was strange because at the beginning of the movie, I don't know how I felt about him saying Leto was weak, because at the beginning of the movie, Irulan was saying, My dad is super sad because he loved Duke Leto as a son.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the movie, he says he was a weak guy. And also, if you look at the Atreides, they were not. They were like the strongest house,
Right. It's a
Right.
weird.
in the Imperium because of how Leto led of that, like leading by inspiring love and loyalty and not through fear, because they had to send a gigantic Harkonnen army and like 3 battalions of Sardaukar in order to make sure that they beat the Atreides. And even then, you know, Duncan got away, Gurney got away, Paul and Jessica got away, and they were all still the best fighters in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then Paul, in like a really demented way, kind of rules the same way of that all the Fremen love him, but not for the reasons that people loved Leto.
Right.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
I don't think it was in character for the Emperor, you know, just a little bit amount that we've seen him in the movie to say that Leto was weak, because then he's like terrified of a weak leader.
That's a great point. Yeah. That's a great point.
No, it's interesting because Emily and Matt were also wondering about Christopher Walken and Florence Pugh. They were like, why is Florence Pugh in this? I viewed her arc in this movie because she figures out like that the Bene Gesserit are up to shenanigans.
Yes.
And like she 100% could warn her dad, like, hey, you might want to pivot your strategy here. But I like in my mind, she consciously decides like, oh, if I marry Paul and Paul wins this whole thing, I can like Lady Macbeth the universe, and I'm cool with that being my option.
Yeah, and I liked the end of the movie, but it kind of blows apart the premise of Messiah. So it should be interesting to see how they do that. But also, Josh, you read at the end of the book. That is not how the wedding of Paul and Irulan goes down. Because Trent in the book, Paul, like, basically in front of everybody says, Chani, you're my girl, and Irulan is my wife in name only. She ain't going to have any kids.
Yep.
We're here to take the throne, and that's it.
Interesting.
And Jessica is also backing this up. That's something else that the movie departs from. Jessica is extremely supportive of Chani at the end of the book, and is like sees the loyal love she has for Paul, and is like, I'm gonna ride or die for her. And
Chani and Jessica hate each other in this movie.
They do.
Well, this speaks to my theory of like why Jessica's the villain of this movie.
Exactly.
She's so committed to the Bene Gesserit thinking
The
of
way.
like, hey, he's gonna be the way that like this girl who makes my son happy as a person, like that doesn't matter to me.
That's where I'm really intrigued to see where this goes, because also Chani does not leave Paul at the end of the book, but she does
not. She's like a full believer at the end of the book,
and she's clearly not in this. So like, I am fascinated to see where her story goes, you know, because like
I'm calling it now. She's gonna kill Paul. There we go. End of the trilogy. I'll announce it right here in 2024.
That would
put money on it.
I wouldn't, but that's an interesting theory.
But Joseph, I feel like like Denis might write a different story than the book writes at this point.
Yeah, so there's broad strokes. He set up a lot of the broad strokes for what Messiah is, but it's almost like Chani and Irulan could be reversed in motivation.
Oh, interesting.
Because, so, you're right, Irulan does not have a lot to do here. She is a major character in Dune and Messiah. Kind of driving some of what the plot of that book is, and so is the Reverend Mother.
I mean, you don't cast Florence Pugh if, you know, that's not going to be a big role later on.
Well, that was one of Emily and Matt's problems, is like this character seems like she exists just for sequel baiting of like the next one.
Which
and I'm like,
that's what Zendaya was in the first movie.
Yeah, and Irulan in the books is kind of like, she's basically the window into Paul in a way, because each chapter of the book starts with something that Irulan writes in her
in the
diary.
journal.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
But in her diary, she's like, "This is what happened when Muad'Dib did this," and then that chapter kind of goes through what happens. And so she's got a lot going on, but there'll be a lot of plotting, like scheming
Well, yeah. Again,
in
like
the
I said,
next one.
it worked enough for me. The idea of like she doesn't inform her dad of what's going on, like that was enough for me. That I'm like, okay, we see like she's already playing the game, and so
Yeah.
that enough justified her existence in this movie. But I get why some people would be like, oh, Florence Pugh was barely in this just to set up the next one. I get
Yeah,
that.
she does like absolutely nothing in the first book other than show up at the end and get betrothed to Paul.
Yes. Do we think that Chani's gonna, there's going to be a faction of Fremen that are following her in this next movie?
That seemed to be the vibe I was getting.
Yeah. I
There, that might be a plot point of the next book.
Okay. Okay.
Not necessarily of Chani doing that,
Yeah.
but of Fremen.
I see. I'm all about that. Like, I really think you need that to just add some depth to these characters. Trent, I don't know. I haven't read Messiah, but your calling of Chani potentially murdering Paul. We did see the vision in the first movie of
Yeah,
her
the very
doing
first
it.
one where like the bloody dagger and all that stuff.
I will just say that would be an enormous change
Yeah.
to the ending of Dune Messiah.
Interesting.
I mean, because so far, Joseph, would you say this has been a faithful adaptation to the Dune book?
For the most part, but there are a lot of things that have departed. And I think the things that have changed are to serve Dune Messiah.
Interesting.
So I secretly think Denis could have just wanted to make Dune Messiah, and to get there, he had to make these two
Really? You think so?
because of what he's set up in these. Because the Holy War and what happens because of it are major plot points of Dune Messiah.
Interesting.
And so I think he's setting it up, and he has set it up for these all basically to feed Dune Messiah.
I mean, that would because Emily and Matt are like, I don't feel like this movie really stands on its own. It just sets up the next one, and so that sort of feeds into like, well, if Denis was more interested in the story of, Messiah, that would sort of track.
So I haven't watched Game of Thrones, but I'm familiar with some of the broad story beats. Dune Messiah, from a political standpoint, strikes me as very similar to Game of Thrones
Interesting.
in how it works.
Interesting.
Because there's a lot of plotting and a lot of scheming and a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on, and backstabbing and secret government, well, not secret government shenanigans, but secret shenanigans going on. People who may not care for the new emperor very much.
Interesting.
Okay. Well, I mean, the great houses denied Paul's ascension, so we know
They were like, no thanks.
he's quickly made some enemies.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to work out very well for him.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that's 5 great houses, though. I don't know. I didn't see that. I would have guessed, hey, my guy Paul, you may want to re-strategize and make some allies, buddy.
Well, he's got the Fremen, so
Trent, do you have any notes of Emily and Matt's that you haven't hit already?
I think there's one left, and I just want to make sure that's it.
Yeah.
So before we get to Trent's note, there's a scene in itself that we have not talked about. I've mentioned it a couple times.
Yeah.
But Paul rolling up and telling everybody, none of you can fight me. I am the Lisan Al Gaib. I'm taking command.
Yes.
When he rolls up into what I've called Fremen Congress, and they say, you're not allowed to talk, and he says, shut up, I can do what I want. And you really see Paul change from Paul Atreides to Muad'Dib, the Lisan Al Gaib. And that scene might be my favorite scene in the movie, when he seizes control of the Fremen and he's like reading people's minds and telling them about their past, and they're losing their minds saying, he's the one, he's the one.
Yeah,
It's
I've gone a
crazy.
little back and forth. I kind of thought it was overacting a little bit when I was like first coming out of the theater because it's so different, not just from Paul the rest of the movie, but like Timothy Chalamet's acting style that
Mhm.
we've seen from his whole
Yeah,
career.
yeah.
That I was like, oh, I don't know, that's big, like that's very big. But the more I sit with it, the more I'm like, well, that is the point of this moment for Paul. So,
Yeah, so that moment like worked perfectly for me because I think you're right of that's not really a Timothy Chalamet thing to do, where he's coming in and just like losing his mind on people and yelling at him. And then I was thinking earlier today, like I saw this dude like singing around a candy shop a couple of months ago, and then he does this, and it worked for me.
The range.
And then Stilgar pretty much crying when when it happened. He was so happy. But
Well, and
yeah,
then the cuts to
that
Chani throughout all of it are great
yeah.
too.
I
yes,
think maybe my favorite part of that scene though is the determination Paul has just as he's walking in, because like
Yes,
all
yes.
the Bene Gesserits walk in and he comes in behind them and he ain't walking slow. He's rolling in there.
A little WWE entrance like.
Yes, very much.
Play Muad'Dib's theme music, please.
Muad'Dib is going over at the Royal Rumble, guys. Cody
Yeah.
Rhodes can't take him down.
Trent, do you have our final critique?
yeah. So it was the Harkonnen twist that the Jessica is Vladimir's offspring. And that
Oh,
she
yeah.
like they were like, does that actually matter? Like, does that really inform it? For me watching the movie, I was like, well, at a bare minimum, it just serves this idea of like power is very concentrated. That like the Bene Gesserit are really only obsessed with like the Emperor, the Harkonnens, and the Atreides. So that's what I
Yes.
thought it was trying to say is just that like the illusion of a whole galaxy of powerful families is even worse. It's like nope, it's just like 3 families. So that's what I thought it was meant to
There's
be. But if it
I
matters more to you guys,
it
or you guys thought differently,
so there's it matters in another one of the books that is not Dune Messiah.
well, and
interesting.
I also think I was talking to my brother about this specific plot reveal earlier, and he was kind of saying like, oh, like maybe that explains a bit of Paul's turn. Like he has the Harkonnen in him.
Mm-hmm.
That is this more like
Yeah,
kind of
because
just
Sure,
like
maybe it is more that it's more that yeah.
well, he has that line before they go to war in Arakeen where he says, "We're fighting Harkonnens, so we're going to
yeah,
fight like Harkonnens."
yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
And they didn't say it in the movie, but we know who Jessica's father is now.
yes,
There are 2 parents.
yes, yeah. We don't know the mother,
Well, that's not true.
but like it hasn't been revealed to us.
I mean, it does, but it's a character in the movies.
Yeah, I got you.
Like we've
Okay.
met them.
Yeah, she may have told Paul to put his hand into a box.
Okay, I wondered this.
I
Okay.
was I was curious
Yeah.
about that too.
So
These Bene Gesserit, man, I swear they are like
They're
playing
crafty.
5D chess. It's crazy.
yeah. So apparently, what I read was they wanted to get the Baron's DNA genetic material into a kid, and he was like, "Nope." So the Reverend Mother went over there, was like, "Come on, buddy." He said, "Okay, right now," and did some things to be frowned upon with the Reverend Mother, and that is how Jessica came about.
Interesting. Okay.
I sort of you sort of get that energy watching part 1 that like she's more than a mentor to Jessica. So I won't say I guessed that, but like there was a noodling in my brain that maybe that was
And
a
she
thing.
goes and talks to the Baron too, because I don't think the Baron knows that Jessica is his daughter.
Mm.
I think
Okay.
he knows that he created a daughter with a Bene Gesserit, but I don't think he knows it's Jessica.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
I
interesting.
don't think he knows that an Atreides is his grandson.
Interesting. Yeah, they like especially the fact that he's dead by the time that gets revealed. It's there's not as much time for even him to sit with that. So, uh, yeah, I probably would have liked a little bit more time with that reveal as well. Trent, you were saying before we hopped on, like you wish, uh, you had it. You were just alluded to. You had a different experience than your sister and brother-in-law. So like, while you like are arguing these points, I feel like you feel differently.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, like I've sort of alluded to already. I I made the thing I mainly like. They said that the thing that I most disagree with is they're like, there's too many unanswered questions at the end of this one.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm like, nah, it's pretty answered. Like the dramatic question in the first movie is like, will Paul become Duke of Atreides? Will he become a Fremen, or will he become this greater mythic figure? And it's like we get the answer in this
Yeah.
movie. And it's
It's
like,
yes.
will the whole like will the holy war be started? Like yes.
Yes.
So like that's where I have a different experience. And I said to Emily earlier today like this. I was like, I don't think it's a thing of like we watched a different movie. I'm just more satisfied with the answers we got than she is, and then Matt
Interesting.
is.
Yeah.
Like what we're talking about. Like they would have liked just more
Yeah.
from a lot of this stuff, and I was okay with it as it is. But I still also agree that breathing room could have been added to some stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. One last question I kind of wanted to ask, because I think this is the common complaint of the first movie was it's half of a movie.
Yep.
So we're now we have the full project. Will you view Dune Part 1 and Part 2 as one complete movie? And like when you rewatch, you have to rewatch one to rewatch the other, or do these stand out enough on their own to you?
I could definitely see myself rewatching Part 2 on by itself. I don't know if I'd ever see myself just throwing on Part 1.
Interesting.
I would feel like once Part 2's at my fingertips, I'd be like, ooh, there was so much exposition and setup in that first one that I need more. And then do I view this as a complete thing for Paul? Yes. But I do think there's broader enough questions about some of the other plot lines and characters that will be either resolved or explored a little more in Part 3 that I'm like, there's still some questions. I don't think it's incomplete like some people do, but I definitely think Paul is the only one who I like. Paul and Shawnee are the only people who feel like they come full circle by the end of this movie for me.
I almost think I'll look at it not in the same way of like story and all of that, but just in the way of watching it in the same way I look at Lord of the Rings, where you kind of will just watch the three of them. Like I think each of the movies, each of the three Lord of the Rings movies works on their own as a movie, but I don't just say like, oh, I'm going to go watch Return of the King, or I'm going to watch The Two Towers, or I'm going to watch The Fellowship of the Ring, and then not move on to one of the other ones, within the next week or two. I think that's how I'll look at this one. I think whenever Messiah comes out, which I'm not expecting for
it's going to be a while,
3 or 4 years.
How about say 3 or 4 years
is the earliest I could see it, which works because of the mechanics of how the Messiah story works. Although not as much with Chani leaving. A lot of stuff happens off screen in Dune Messiah. But there's characters in this movie and the first one that just don't even show up at all in Dune Messiah.
Oh, really?
We'll probably still leave a bunch of questions about them. And it's not like little side character. It's important characters that just don't show up at all.
That's
in
interesting.
Messiah.
Do you think there's a way Denis would fit those characters back into the fold in a movie, or does it just not make sense?
There's a way that some of them can fit in. It would just be swapping them for other characters' story arcs.
Interesting.
But, I think the ending is very much more open-ended than the Dune book is, because the Dune book just kind of ends when Paul's made the Emperor. And in this one, it ends with them taking off to go start the Holy War, which is just not how the book ends. It's kind of implied in how the book ends, but you don't actually see them rising up to take it out. And you almost feel like, because the movie ends on Chani, that, the end of the first part, Paul goes out to the desert to have his journey, and it's almost like she's going out to the desert to have hers now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
There's some
feel that
nice
way.
symmetry there.
I do feel like it's a satisfying 2-part movie, but I think it'll be improved, improved with the third one. Because the third
Okay.
one has a very definitive ending.
Mm.
Or second book, what would end up being the third movie.
Like, you know what? It's kind of how I feel about Across the Spider-Verse. Like,
I was
where I'm
wondering if this would come up.
like, I was like, Miles gets a full journey in that movie 100%. But even more than Dune Part 2, like, there's so many other plot threads in Across the Spider-Verse left hanging that I'm like,
Yeah.
it will really depend on Beyond for how I feel about this as a whole work of art. I think that even if Dune Messiah is somehow bad, I will still view Dune Part 2 as good,
Yeah.
though.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's fair.
And Dune Messiah will, if they follow the book, will probably be the most controversial of the
Ooh,
three.
fun.
Oh, interesting. Well, and I'm like, I feel like Denis is going to have some tricks up his sleeve for some alterations to this final act, which will always cause controversy, right? When someone changes the original text. So I'm eager to see what he does. We'll just have to wait 3 or 4 years. It's fine. It's no big deal.
It's all good.
Hopefully we get that Bene Gesserit show sometime in there to hold us over.
I would love that though. Yes, I would. I think originally it was slated for this year. I don't know.
I think
if
it
Then they
was.
fired their whole staff, and then
Yeah, that would cause some issues. I guess
that'll do it.
That'll do it. All right. Do we have any final thoughts on Dune Part 2?
No, I mean, really liked it. As I said, as a visual audio demonstration of craftspeople's abilities here. This is kind of an amazing achievement, specifically in the blockbuster realm. Every performance is dialed in. Javier
Yeah.
Bardem's great, Zendaya's great, Timothée Chalamet, Austin Butler. And yeah, I found even if the pacing of everything didn't work for me, like the fact that this movie is a coming of age story, a sci-fi story, a fantasy story, a chosen one thing, like a meditation on free will versus determinism, and like a Shakespearean tragedy all in a under 3-hour thing is kind of insane.
Yes.
And I have to respect it, even if I think that some things could have used a little more breathing room. That's literally my only knock against this movie. Is just a little bit of the pacing, but I find nothing in this outright bad or terrible or anything like that. So well done, Denis. You did what many consider to be like the impossible adaptation.
Yeah. I love it. Joseph, how about you?
Yeah, I think I'd agree. I really enjoyed the movie. I'm still not all the way sold on Baby in the Womb, Alia. But, I mean, that's part of what was thought to be the unfilmable section of it. I mean, they have done Alia like that in other adaptations where she's kind of walking around and being like a creepy baby. But it's difficult kind of in the tone that this movie has been set up in.
Yeah.
Because I think the movie and then the sci-fi series had a little bit of like cheese in them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not really any cheese to kind of set that up in this one. It's very serious, kind of straightforward manner of presentation. But yeah, I think, from a technical standpoint, even if it doesn't win score next year at the Oscars, I don't really know what's going to beat it out for like some of the other technical awards.
Oh, it's going to clean up the technicals.
Yep.
I mean, just with kind of the reaction it's getting, it could probably be a Best Picture nominee.
I think it has the best chance of winning since Return of the King won.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. I mean, what is it
of blockbusters?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, what is it going up against this year?
The only thing is Francis Ford Coppola, the man who directed both Godfathers, is making a new movie this year.
The Megalopolis movie.
And
That's
so
right.
if that is even remotely good, the Academy might, because it's a master coming back to the arena, like that will be a big thing. But other than that, until we get the November dump of award season movies, there's nothing on paper coming out right now that I think really rivals it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we did just have Madam Web, that masterpiece.
Jennifer Lopez, This Is Me Now came out, shocked the world.
I'm sure the
getting
Beyonce,
Godzilla X Kong, so
the Beyonce concert, Deadpool.
No, I definitely think this gets nominated, and I think it has a strong chance.
Yep.
People were pointing out online. Remember, the first part won 6 Oscars in 21. It was the most
Oh my gosh,
accoladed
it
movie
did.
of 2021.
And
Wow.
I think Return of the King deserved it, but Return of the King also got the awards as like a culmination of
Yeah.
Correct. It was in recognition of the whole
3
thing.
movies.
Yes.
So I think that could potentially be done here as like a culmination of the 2, because I don't think Dune Messiah will go over as well as Return of the King. But I think it'll still be good because what Denis Villeneuve movie that's come out recently hasn't been like acclaimed.
This dude's
Right,
on an
right.
insane run right now.
Yeah, he really is. It's impressive. Yeah, I think this is a technically flawless movie. I think it is transcendent. I think when we think about this era in filmmaking, like we're always going to think about Dune Part 2. When we think about the 2020s, we're always going to think about this movie. Like I genuinely think from a pop culture standpoint, this is the new Lord of the Rings, and this is I think it has staying power within pop culture where people can both come to appreciate filmmaking and be in the moment and enjoy like a really good blockbuster. And like and for the like fantasy and book lovers out there, like it's there's kind of something for everybody.
Yeah.
And so this movie just absolutely crushes it. It's one of the most beautiful movies I've ever watched. I will be thinking about some of these scenes for a very long time, and I can't wait. Like there are not many movies that I look forward to rewatching in the theaters. This is one of them. This is one of the few that I can't wait to get back out to watch this again. Whatever problems that I have with the pacing and plot of this movie, I think that it executes everything else, like the overall themes of the movie, and the actors portraying their characters are just incredible. They were incredible in the first part, and they're equally as incredible in part 2. So I think this is just an astounding achievement. And I think that's the part where I'm like, even with the things that we talked about today that didn't work as well, like I can't talk about this movie without heaping praise upon it. You know what I mean? So
no, I mean we've said what 9 negative things for every one negative thing we've said. Like,
oh yeah, like 9 positives for 1 negative. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. What grade would you guys give this? Have you thought about that at all?
I'm gonna go with an A. I want to go too high too fast, but it's pretty unassailable. I'm gonna hold back a little bit for some pacing issues and plotting issues, and while I don't think it's incomplete, I do think there is a level of unresolvedness that does hold it back from me fully being like, heck yeah. So that's A.
Fair.
I don't know. I was thinking I would maybe do an A, and then I was like, what's holding me back from going all the way? So we're going all the way. A+. I mean, I think a lot of the problems that you guys have had with the movies are like justifiable things that just worked for me.
Sure.
Yeah,
100%.
There wasn't anything in the movie aside from wanting to see a little creepy baby that there wasn't anything for me that didn't really work in the movie. So I'll give it the A+. And an A+ doesn't mean you got 100, but you can get like a 98.
That's right.
There you go.
That's the Rotten Tomato score.
2
That
points
is the Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, I checked it later today, and it was at like 93.
Oh, it's dropping. The haters are coming out.
Everyone's got to have an opinion.
Audience is 95. So
just wait for like the next 10 days, and then be like, Dune 2 actually sucks. The clickbait articles are coming.
Oh, it'll come.
Yep.
It'll absolutely come.
Yeah, I mean, 2 points off for no creepy baby, and other than that, we're good.
There you go.
It's an A+ for me too. I like I said before, I like the achievement that this movie was cannot be really taken back that far. Like I feel like the floor for this movie is like a 95 in my opinion. Like it's just like that's the floor. Like it can't go any lower because of how good everything is acted and everything is directed and filmed, and the story is compelling. Like we talked about at the beginning, this is this is not a cameo centric typical blockbuster movie, but yet we were all engaged throughout the entirety of it, and it had a great box office weekend. So there's lots of people probably in similar theaters as we had.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It doubled part one's opening weekend.
yes, I saw that. It's incredible,
and it's almost at like half of its worldwide run now.
That's unreal.
Because
That's unreal.
I think when I checked, it's at like 180 million worldwide
Globally?
right now.
Yeah,
And part
it
one made
hadn't even opened in like I think China and one other country yet either. So I mean,
yeah, and part one ended up making 400 and something million.
Which makes sense because it also had the same time as Max simultaneous release, so that definitely hurt its box office back in 21.
So it'll go. Those box office numbers will continue to climb, no doubt. All right, guys, this has been a blast.
I think we did it.
I think we covered everything. Pretty hard to do.
We did it. We did it. Hooray!
That's right. Well, thank
we
you
did
all.
It under the runtime of the movie.
Yeah.
We did. That's a big deal. That's a big deal for us. We thank you so much for joining us today. We will be back soon with some more content. March is going to be a fun month for us. Just stay tuned. We got some fun ideas percolating over here at the Stinger. So as always, you can subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. You can follow us at the Stinger Pod on Instagram, on TikTok, and thank you so much for listening. We will be back soon.